There are plenty of films that follow the action of the villain, such as American Psycho, Joker, and Scarface. However, some stories pull a fast one, tricking the audience into believing such characters are the good guys, and only when the curtain is drawn does it become clear the heroes have conned us all. Sometimes viewers amongst us will wonder how they didn't see the truth sooner. Maybe the main character didn't realise they were wicked, or maybe the villain was a really, really good liar. So with that being said, I'm Jem from Whatculture.com, and here are movies you did not realise you were following the villain, the Iron Giant. After overactive child Hogarth sees a strange light in the forest, he ventures out to explore the woods and discovers a metal-eating robot who fell from the stars. Despite his intimidating appearance, Hogarth quickly develops a deep bond with the giant and also becomes incredibly protective of his new friend, knowing government officials will mistake the giant as a destructive weapon. That's why it's crushing to learn that Giant is a destructive weapon. When the towering automaton sees Hogarth using a toy gun, a self-defense program causes him to instinctively attack the boy. In that moment, it becomes as clear as day the giant was initially designed to destroy. After Hogarth seemingly dies, the giant's initial programming activates, causing him to blast everyone and everything in sight. Even though Hogarth convinces the giant to abandon his destructive crusade, it's terrifying to think of what could have happened if he didn't. Also, a deleted scene shows how the giant's race has laid waste to numerous worlds, causing them to implode. Although he ultimately chose peace, it is possible the giant has taken countless lives in the past.
Memento. Christopher Nolan's ingenious thriller, Memento, does a fantastic job of making the audience initially entirely sympathetic towards the plight of protagonist Leonard Shelby. Following a brutal home invasion which caused the death of his wife, Lenny is desperately trying to find the surviving attacker, all while being unable to create new memories due to the amnesia he suffers with since the attack. But the film's big twist, of course, is that Leonard's wife actually survived the attack, and only died when Lenny accidentally administered the incorrect insulin dose to her due to his amnesia. As tragic an accident as that is, what ultimately makes Lenny Memento's villain is his decision to use his amnesia to his advantage, to deceive himself of the truth that he unintentionally killed his own wife, instead concocting a revenge narrative to distract himself from what really happened. Thus, Lenny's climactic decision to frame Teddy, another dubious character, as his wife's killer, in turn ensuring he'll kill him in the future, is simply unacceptable enough to make him the film's true bad guy.
Samaritan. Julius Avery's superhero flick centers around the superpowered Samaritan and his villainous twin Nemesis. The story takes place 25 years after the siblings fought one another, leading to Nemesis's death. Hungry for power, gang leader Cyrus proclaims himself as the new Nemesis and begins inciting chaos throughout the city. Though Samaritan has tried to live as a civilian for decades as Joe Smith, he's forced to come out of retirement to stop Cyrus. When Cyrus taunts Joe for playing the hero, Joe informs him that he is the bad guy. In a flashback, it's revealed how Samaritan defeated Nemesis but refused to kill him. When the ground gave way, Nemesis watched Samaritan plummet to his demise, despite his best efforts to save him. After Samaritan spared his life, Nemesis swore to dedicate his life to peace to commemorate his fallen brother. Interestingly, Nemesis never lies about his identity at any point in the story. When he repeatedly denies he's Samaritan, it looks like he's protecting his secret identity, and when he tells others that Nemesis died that night, he is, in the words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, telling the truth from a certain point of view.
Nightcrawler. It's no secret from early on in the movie that Nightcrawler's Lou Bloom is a difficult character to warm to. He commits theft through violent means if necessary, and seems tirelessly committed to becoming a successful videographer. But at least for a time, it still feels like we're supposed to cheer him on. By the third act of the film, however, that all changes. He literally phones in a shootout between the police and criminals for his own gain, and even intentionally causes his assistant Rick to be killed in the crossfire due to leverage he held over him. The final scene sees Lou expanding his own media empire with interns and a new fleet of vehicles, confirming that he wasn't merely a down-on-his-luck weirdo desperate to make a modest living, but an absolute psychopath obsessed with ensuring his own endless upward mobility at any cost.
The Others. The others follows Grace Stewart, played by Nicole Kidman, a mother of two who lives in an isolated country house. Grace keeps her home in perpetual darkness to accommodate her children, Anne and Nicholas, who suffer from severe photosensitivity. When she notices the curtains around her home have been removed, Grace believes someone's trying to harm her children. After several supernatural incidents occur, Grace is convinced her house is haunted. Though Grace's concerns are proven correct, it's not in the way she presumes. In the third act, Grace discovers she and her children are the others and have been unintentionally haunting the real residents of the house. Grace remembers how she lost her mind when her husband died in the war, compelling her to smother her children before taking her own life. When Grace returned as a ghost, she convinced herself the murder-suicide she performed was nothing more than a bad dream. Upon learning this, the children are relieved to see they are no longer vulnerable to light. Nevertheless, it is horrifying how they've been reborn as wandering spirits that are unable to move on because of their mother's horrific actions.
Hereditary. At the end of Hereditary, it's confirmed that practically everything the Graham family has been put through over the course of the movie has been part of a plan to place the demon Paimon within the body of the Graham's son Peter. But writer-director Ari Aster has also since confirmed that Peter's eccentric sister, Charlie, who is brutally killed in an accident at the end of the first act, was actually the original host to Paimon prior to her demise. It's implied that Peter's dead grandmother Ellen was a major figure in the demonic cult, and given that she was said to have been extremely attached to Charlie as a baby, it makes sense that she actually placed Paimon within Charlie, a temporary host, when she was born. This also kind of explains Charlie's generally bizarre behavior, such as her signature glottal stop and withdrawn demeanor. Because while it might at first merely suggest a typical misfit teenager, it's actually because Charlie doesn't really exist at all. She's just a vessel containing Paimon as he waits for his male host. And so the cult's plan involved killing Charlie in order to free Paimon before using a traumatized Peter as the new vessel. Charming.
Unbreakable. In Unbreakable, David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis, is involved in a horrific train accident that results in the death of everyone on board, except for him. Soon after, he encounters comic book collector Elijah Price, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Since Price was born with brittle bones, he always believed there was someone on the other side of the spectrum who was immune to injury, and tells David he was given this power to help those in need. Dismissing Elijah's claims at first, David later embraces his destiny, becoming a street vigilante who protects the innocent and punishes the wicked. In the closing moments, it's revealed that Elijah was so obsessed with finding an indestructible savior, he orchestrated several tragedies, including the train crash that befell David. Elijah shows absolutely zero remorse for his actions, believing the people he had murdered were a necessary sacrifice to find his hero. Not only is this a shocking revelation, it feels like a genuine betrayal to the audience. All this time, viewers thought Elijah Price was some sort of superhero mentor like Professor X, unaware that he was actually pretty much the opposite.
The Usual Suspects. While it's fair to say that the majority of the Usual Suspects' main characters wouldn't be described as heroes per se, they're all likeable and interesting enough to come across more as charming criminals than out-and-out villains. That's no truer than in the case of Verbal Kint, a con artist with cerebral palsy who spends the bulk of his screen time interrogated by Agent Dave Kujan. While we're always fully aware that he's a criminal, the film makes it explicitly clear that the baddie at the top of the pile is really this shadowy criminal mastermind known as Kaiser Soze. Except the film's iconic final twist reveals that Kint is in fact Kaiser Soze. Ingeniously, we were all strung along in much the same way that Kujan was, spending most of the movie's runtime sat opposite Public Enemy number 1, hiding in plain sight.
Red Notice. Red Notice opens with FBI profiler John Hartley, Dwayne Johnson, arresting master thief Nolan Booth, Ryan Reynolds, after he tries to steal a bejeweled egg. Unfortunately, the artifact is swiped immediately after by another thief, Sarah Black, played by Gal Gadot. Before John has a chance to track her down, Interpol arrests him after he's implicated in the theft. Out of desperation, John is forced to work alongside Nolan to track down Sarah, retrieve the egg, and clear his name. Now, there are countless films like The Fugitive or Minority Report that follow this formula. As such, there's little reason to believe that the authorities' wild claims about our hero are actually valid at all. all. But after John locates Sarah during the climax, he reveals they were in on it from the beginning, proving that the authorities' suspicions were actually spot on. Upon revisiting Red Notice, there are stacks of hints that John is not who he says he is. In fact, he flat out says, "I'm the bad guy," the first time he meets Nolan. Since he throws this line away, first-time viewers assume he's being sarcastic, but in reality, John gives away the twist in the opening 5 minutes.
Looper. In the case of modern classic sci-fi film Looper, protagonist Joe is literally both the hero and the villain. Despite being a mob hitman at the start of the story, Joe is ultimately forced to find his inner hero when it comes to facing off against a villain intent on changing the future by murdering a child. That man just so happens to be Joe's older self, who, after witnessing the murder of his wife at the hands of men sent by mobster the Rainmaker, travels back in time to kill the Rainmaker when he's just an innocent child named Sid. After murdering another child he suspects to be the Rainmaker, old Joe pays Sid a visit and very nearly kills Sid's mother, Sarah, which is implied to be the event which would cause Sid to become the Rainmaker in the first place. In his big heroic moment, young Joe then decides to shoot himself in the chest, immediately killing himself and causing old Joe to blink out of existence, in turn saving Sarah's life and ensuring Sid never becomes the Rainmaker. Either way, we've kind of been watching the good guy chase the bad guy, even though they're both technically the same person. So yeah.
The Founder. The Founder starts off as a typical underdog story, with struggling salesman Ray Kroc selling milkshake machines when he stumbles upon a drive-in restaurant called McDonald's. After speaking to the sibling owners, Maurice and Dick, the three agree to expand the business together, and following many trials and tribulations, Kroc turns McDonald's into a global fast food chain, making him billions. On paper, The Founder sounds like an uplifting story, if not for one issue. Ray Kroc is a tyrant. He worked extremely hard, we'll give him that, but he stepped on everyone to accomplish his goals. At first, Kroc's behaviour seemed somewhat justified. After all, businessmen and women have to be ruthless to make it to the top, right? However, it becomes impossible to defend Kroc when he goes against his partner's wishes, sabotages the original restaurant, and abruptly leaves his wife too. The stress of it all is too much for Maurice, causing him to go into a diabetic shock. But rather than recognising that his erratic behaviour almost killed him, Kroc pushes the McDonald's brother to sell him the business while he's vulnerable. Despite getting what he wanted, Kroc did not stop there. He never gave the McDonald brothers the royalties he promised, which were worth $100 million annually. To spite them further, Kroc set up a McDonald's across the street from the original restaurant, putting the brothers out of business. Although Kroc often comes across as a jerk, it's only in the third act when viewers really realise what an absolute monster he is.
Fight Club. You can certainly sympathise with Fight Club's protagonist Jack for suffering with overpowering mental illness, which causes his mind to create a second dissociated personality, the ultra-cool, sexy badass he always wanted to be, Tyler Durden. This is a fact hidden from the audience until deep into the film's third act, of course, with most of the movie seeming to depict an effete white-collar worker who slowly begins to shed his obsession with capitalism as he embraces traditional codes of masculinity courtesy of his new pal, Tyler. As Fight Club morphs into Project Mayhem, it's abundantly clear that Durden is the film's villain, not Jack. At least until we find out that they've been one and the same person the entire time. Even if you accept that Project Mayhem was focused more on property destruction and economic anarchy than causing actual death, Jack/Durden's scheme isn't as cool as teenage boys might think it is. It's quite clearly insane, actually.
Nightmare Alley. From the get-go, it's apparent that Nightmare Alley's protagonist, Stan Carlisle, is a big manipulator. Carlisle pretends to be psychic to worm his way into people's hearts and wallets, although he doesn't come across as a typical bad guy since he starts off as a down-on-his-luck bumpkin who's just trying to make ends meet. When he rebrands himself into a suave psychic for aristocrats, it's hard not to be impressed by his transformation, but he goes a bit too far. A powerful industrialist named Grindel asks Stan to speak to a dead woman, Dory. Since Grindle blames himself for her death, Stan realizes he can milk this deal. So instead of giving Grindle a straightforward cold reading, Carlisle offers multiple spirit sessions, bleeding his client dry. And rather than leaving it there, Stan convinces his partner to meet Grindle while impersonating Dory's spirit. By making this decision, Stan is no longer just telling his customers what they want to hear, but giving them false hope. And when Ezra sees through the ruse, Stan murders him and his bodyguard. Somehow, it actually does get worse, as a flashback reveals Carlisle lived with his bedridden father before pursuing his deceptive lifestyle. Tired of caring for his old man, Stan killed him so he could start his life anew. So not only is Stan Carlisle now a cold-blooded killer, he always has been.
The Innocents. The 1961 horror classic The Innocents is one of the most deliciously ambiguous genre films ever made, following governess Miss Giddens as she watches over two children residing within a lush estate, which just might be haunted. Much has been written of the movie and Henry James's source novel The Turn of the Screw, both of which leave the viewer to ponder the meaning of the events within. This is especially true of The Innocents' chilling ending, where the young boy Giddens is caring for, Miles, drops dead after being chased by her. A distraught Giddens then cradles Miles' corpse and kisses him on the lips. Throughout the film, it's suggested that two of the estate's dead former employees, Miss Jessel and Peter Quint, may now haunt the grounds, even possessing Miles and his sister Flora so that they can continue their romantic relationship. Yet many have interpreted these final moments as confirming that Giddens was in fact imagining the ghost the entire time, and that poor Miles simply died from fright as Giddens chased after him. It's extremely open to interpretation, but it's also safe to say that all doesn't seem well with Miss Giddens, and she may have been a mentally unwell powder keg waiting to explode from the very beginning.
Saltburn. In Saltburn, Lona Oliver falls in love with a handsome jock called Felix Catton, played by Jacob Elordi, shortly after starting at Oxford University. After the two hit it off, Felix invites Oliver to his luscious family estate, Saltburn. Though Oliver tries to enjoy him, Felix's family routinely makes jabs at him, causing a lot of friction in the house. Now, it is obvious early on that Oliver is deeply disturbed, especially after watching that scene. But viewers should still be rooting for Oliver, considering his horrific upbringing. So when Felix learns Oliver lied about his tragic life for attention, it is evident that he's far more two-faced than the Catton family could have imagined. However, the extent of Oliver's deception is only truly comprehended near the end. Oliver manages to kill or permanently remove every single Catton from the Saltburn estate, allowing him to become the solitary owner. In the last few minutes, a flashback reveals how Oliver manipulated his boyfriend and his family since day one. At first, Oliver came across as a pretty weird dude, but after watching the final scene, there is no question that Oliver is a complete psychopath. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too.
Starship Troopers. It may seem impossible to believe nowadays, but when sci-fi war film Starship Troopers was released back in 1997, the overwhelming majority of critics and audiences completely missed that it was a satire of fascism, particularly the American imperialist kind. If the movie was marketed as an earnest bug hunt, where the clean-cut, good-looking American soldiers ventured off to slaughter the grotesque alien others, the film itself not so subtly suggested that the ambitious humans were really the true villains after all. Given Starship Troopers' abundance of tongue-in-cheek faux propaganda intended to satirize the military-industrial complex, it's easy to side with the bugs, who are having their turf encroached upon by an aggressively expanding human race. Furthermore, if you consider the possibility that the bugs' supposed asteroid strike on Earth was nothing more than a false flag operation created by the humans to stir up hatred of the bugs, then the humans become a whole other level of insidious.
A perfect getaway. In A Perfect Getaway, newlyweds Cliff and Sydney are on their honeymoon in Hawaii when they meet another couple, Nick and Gina. After hearing reports of a man and woman committing murders in the area, tension between the four is sky high. However, when Gina checks out Cliff and Sydney's so-called wedding photos, she's horrified to see that they are of a different bride and groom, meaning the newlyweds are the reported serial killers. What makes this twist effective is how the film spells it out in almost every single pivotal scene. For instance, one of the first things Sydney says to her partner is, "Are you insane?" Later, when Cliff pulls out a wad of cash, he seemingly jokes that he robbed a bank. Elsewhere, Nick says he recognises Cliff's face, implying he's seen him on the news, and although the film opens with footage of Cliff and Sydney's supposed wedding, they themselves are never actually seen at that wedding.
Falling Down. Joel Schumacher's Falling Down is one of the most ludicrously entertaining and provocative films of the 1990s, following a frustrated, unemployed man, William Foster, as he rampages across Los Angeles on the hottest day of the year. What's so brilliant about this movie is that it's really an acid test for the audience's own prejudices. The film starts off with Bill exasperated by many relatable irritations, such as traffic jams, annoying convenience store workers, and fast food joints that deliver subpar food. But Bill's reactions become increasingly unrelatable, as he pulls a machine gun out at the fast food place, murders a neo-Nazi, and ends up terrorizing his estranged wife and young daughter. Though initially presented as a champion of the frustrated everyman, his progressively violent and destructive behaviour ultimately ensures that he's the film's villain, not the society that has created him. This is bolstered by some home video footage which shows Bill angrily shouting at his family, suggesting a pattern of explosive behaviour, and a terrific final sequence in which Sergeant Prendergast causes Bill to ask, "I'm the bad guy." Yes, you are, Bill.
The prime of Miss Jean Brody. In the movie, Jean Brody, played by Maggie Smith, teaches at a strict all-girls school that's overseen by Miss McKay. Unlike the other tutors, Jean is a passionate free spirit who refuses to abide by the rules. Rather than just focusing on the curriculum, Jean pushes her doting pupils to break down barriers, explore their passions, and forge their own paths. When McKay tries to fire her, it's not hard to cheer when Jean pulls the stuffy headmistress in her place. When it turns out that Jean admires some questionable figures, such feelings appear to stem from naivety rather than malice. On the surface, our whimsical protagonist seems like the mentor every student dreams of having. But over time, it's unmistakable that Jean's demeanour is a calculated performance. Slowly but surely, the charismatic teacher is proven to be a delusional, hypocritical, and deceitful bully. She doesn't just manipulate her students, but grooms them, using her dogmatic views to encourage one student to venture into the war, which leads to her death. What's worse is Jean shows zero regret or shame no matter how often her influence wrecks the lives around her. She often plays the victim, almost like she's oblivious to how destructive her actions are. Unlike the other entries on this list, there isn't a specific moment when the penny drops. Due to the subtlety of Jean, different people pick up on her true character at different times, but once viewers recognise how staggeringly manipulative she is, they'll find it hard to believe they ever sided with her in the first place.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off. As a youngster, you will love Ferris Bueller for being a charming, quick-witted rogue. But when you get a little older, you might find it tougher to tolerate or even excuse his straight-up sociopathic behaviour. Though the film's surface-level villain, Dean of Students Edward R. Rooney, is largely portrayed as a cartoonish, unlikable goof, his motivations are at least understandable given Ferris's frequently manipulative, narcissistic, and self-serving actions throughout. But what really makes Ferris the true villain is his treatment of his poor pal Cameron, frequently bullying him into doing his bidding. Of course, the film tries to ultimately dress it all up as Ferris helping Cameron become a more assertive and self-actualized person. But make no mistake, Ferris's goals are entirely selfish. There comes a time in your life where you realise you haven't been hanging around with the fleet-footed hero of the story, but a man who is going to be a major piece of work in adulthood.